Hello everyone, my name is Soyod Saim Shafiq Joy and I am studying Bachelor of Laws in Taylor's University, Malaysia. Now I am going to discuss whether the requirement for formalities detracts from the autonomy of landowner in dealing with their properties. So let's begin. In English land law, formality is a very common thing. It is a necessity of law that matters of substance be codified in a precise way in order to have legal ramifications. The legislation establishes statutory provisions on land transfers, limiting the holders of legal or equitable property interests to those who comply with the formalities. Nevertheless, a landowner may find it useful or useless. On the other hand, there are two types of autonomy. One is moral and the other one is personal. The ability to self-regulate without outside influence is known as personal autonomy, whereas moral autonomy refers to self-imposition of moral standards on one's own decision making. This is affirmed by John Christman in an online article called Autonomy in Moral and Political Philosophy. To determine whether the requirement for formalities detracts from the autonomy of landowner in dealing with their properties, we must take into account properly the benefits and detriments of formalities. One significant advantage of formality rules is that they alert parties to transaction that their acts may have legal repercussions. Additionally, it serves as a safeguard against snap judgments or poorly thought out choices that may regret later on. As a result, the parties have the chance to find out what effects their actions will have. They can decide whether or not they want to move through with the deal in a fully informed manner. In the case of Sharma versus Simposh 2011, due to a lack of formal legality, the court firmly cancels the entire agreement. Another advantage of formality is that it safeguards against external pressures like coercion or undue influence. Formality makes it harder to pressurize someone into a transaction by making it more difficult to enter one. Since formality calls for a third party to serve as a witness, there is a significant chance that such influence will be discovered. Thus, formality discourages those who exercise it. Formality requirements have a clear advantage over substantive doctrines of undue influence, misrepresentations, and the like in that they help to prevent the victim of pressure from entering an unwanted transaction, even though to some extent this protective role has been replaced by these doctrines. One more benefit of formality is it aids in the making of the terms of transaction clear to the parties. For example, we can look at the case of HSBC Trust Company and Gabriel Quinn 2007. In this case, the claimant's paperwork was found not to be a deed by the court because the wording of the paperwork was not clear, although other formalities were met. Therefore, he couldn't purchase the freehold. If formality appears to be particularly complicated, the parties may seek legal advice. The formality of a transaction might also inform the parties of its specific legal implications. For instance, tenants signing up for brief fixed term tenancies must receive letters under Ground 3 Schedule 2 of Housing Act 1988 informing them of rental agreements low tenure security. Another benefit of formality is it secures the evidence. When memories are no longer reliable, the parties to the transaction may need proof of the transaction's terms or existence to avoid or resolve conflicts in future. This is crucial for land-based transactions because one of the distinguishing qualities of real estate is its extreme endurance. Evidence is the primary advantage of formality to the courts because a judge will not have been involved in circumstances leading up to the transaction. When he or she is asked to rule on an alleged transaction, it will require greater proof of its existence and conditions than the original parties. Because formalities often result in additional good activities. They might also serve a supplementary evidential purpose for the courts. One benefit is that it forces parties to think about their actions before engaging in transactions. If they then follow through with the formality, this is a strong proof that they had the full intention of engaging into the transaction. Another benefit of formality for the parties is channeling, as Fuller put it. This phrase refers to the parties' potential ability to employ formality as a legal weapon to make sure their transaction has legal effect. Their intent is channeled through formality towards a specific legal objective. For instance, the seal used to have a good channeling effect in English law because it was typically enough to grant legal validity to the documents to which it was attached. Land law formalities are less helpful in this regard because a land law transaction may fail for a variety of legitimate reasons even if the formalities are completely performed. Formalities also give priorities to third parties. To be more precise, witnesses of the transaction. When publicity is lacking, formalities can safeguard third parties. There is typically a regulation stating that transaction is ineffective against a third party as a purchaser for value when transaction negatively affecting land is not registered because there is a danger that third parties will not be able to learn it. So, based on the discussions on the benefits of formality in procedures regarding transaction of land, it can be said that due to formality obligations, landowners encounter restrictions on their personal autonomy. However, the law allows for exceptions to the formality requirements, which means that it does not completely limit personal autonomy of the landowner. For example, in accordance with Law of Properties Act 1925, Section 54, subsection 2, a landowner may issue a lease without a deed. Such laws, allowing for exclusions from the normal formality requirements, acknowledge that people often arrange ad hoc temporary tenancies. In the case of Young and Laurentani 2007, we can see that the court is willing to review the agreement's intent and issue a decision that maintains justice in situations where no agreement is binding due to formality non-compliance. In fact, the formality requirements might support the moral liberty of landowner when he draws a deed or contract for his property, given that the document could have legal repercussions in future. The owner is likely to think about and reflect on the content, including any ethical consequences. Similar points are made by Critchley in her explanation of how formalities urge the parties to deliberate and refrain from making snap judgments. Even when The partners in a family relationship intend for their agreements to be legally binding. There may be strong emotional elements that prevent them from formalizing their arrangements. Generally speaking, such a partner will operate in a manner that is based on mutual trust and collaboration, effectively depending on a sense of security that is brought on by the emotional connection but extended to cover property matters. In the end, we can say that even though formality requirements typically limit a landowner's personal autonomy in managing his property, his moral autonomy is not diminished but rather promoted. Additionally, case laws and statutes show that court is willing to exercise some discretion in cases where formalities are not followed, but justice must be upheld. Formalities may seem burdensome, but they aid in promoting clarity, safeguarding the rights of the landowner and the buyer, and advancing developments.